Hi everyone, welcome back to Research Methods with Module 2. It was great to meet some of you in the forums last week, and I look forward to getting to know all of you more throughout the course. I did notice that you guys are from very diverse backgrounds, living all over the world, doing all sorts of different things. And I'm really excited because I think because you have such various backgrounds and different areas of expertise, I think we'll end up with a group of very different and interesting research questions, and I very much look forward to hearing your ideas. Without further ado, let's get into the first topic in Module 2, which is a bird's eye view of the research process. Sometimes, when we're doing personal research, like about chocolate or clothing brands or vacation deals, the process might look something like this, where we already know what we want to find out. We just have to conduct some, quote, research to justify it. And corporations might do the same to lure us into buying their products. But in health science, it may literally be a matter of life or death to have the wrong conclusions. So it's extremely important to do things in the right order. In fact, one of my previous mentors, who was a really famous researcher in neuroscience, said to me, "Don't even hope to find X or Y with your research study. That hope could bias you and lead you astray in the research process." Is that kind of extreme? Maybe. I haven't quite figured that out yet. But let's just talk about what is this research process that she was referring to. In almost all social, health, and basic science fields, the general research process follows the same pattern. First, you identify a question, then you design a study, you collect the data, analyze the data, and finally, you report the findings. And if this was a really good study, the findings should inspire even further questions, leading to further research proposals, looking more like a cyclical pattern rather than just a start to finish. So let's talk in just a little bit more detail about each step. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention, our course is going to focus on the first two steps, the identifying a question part and the designing a study part. I know that looks like only 2 out of 5 steps in the research process, but really half the battle, if not more, is already done once you've done those 2 steps. And we will also be touching upon data collection, data analysis, and how to report findings. But we won't really go into too much detail on doing those tasks because there simply isn't enough time in one summer to do it. All right, first step is to identify a study question. Now this should be pretty familiar sounding already because we began discussing this topic in Module 1. And ideally, you have already begun to brainstorm some potential study questions. A quick review. Identifying a research question means choosing a topic and a specific query that will determine the whole point of the research. Now this may sound easy, or maybe not, but it is an extremely important part of the process. So think about this. If Edward Jenner had never wondered why milkmaids who have had cowpox didn't get smallpox, countless lives wouldn't have been saved by the invention of the vaccine. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, Google Edward Jenner. It's a very interesting story there. More recently, if researchers hadn't wondered about suicidal behaviors in adolescents who are taking antidepressant medications for the first time, there might have been many more teen suicides. So again, it's very important to be asking the right research questions. Because in our society, we only have limited resources, we can't ask all of the questions that we're curious about. So every question that's not relevant or not super important or interesting that's asked is taking the place of a really important question that could be saving lives or improving lives. For your project, no pressure. You don't have to come up with the next Nobel Prize-worthy health research study. Most of us will not get the chance to think of anything that good in our research careers. But do carefully consider what health-related issues are most interesting to you and also important to your community. We will talk more specifically about identifying a research question later in this module. Once you know your question, you can select an approach, or in other words, design your study. This step is also crucial because it determines how you will attempt to answer the research question. How you ask it can really determine the quality of the outcome or the validity of the outcome. For example, say you're on a first date and you want to know more about your date's interpersonal style and personality and just whether you want to spend more time with them. Now, would you ask them directly, hey, are you a reasonable and courteous and nice person? Or would you maybe observe how they handle the situation when the waiter brings them the wrong dish? So these two approaches, one would be a more direct interview kind of approach, and the second being more of an observational approach. These two methods could potentially lead you to completely different answers to your original question. And this answer might be very interesting to you. So, designing study determines how we will attempt to answer the research question, chooses the best method for answering your question. And here's also where you will determine specific variables, measures, population, sample, and procedures for the study. Now, if those terms don't make a lot of sense yet, that's okay. We'll go into a lot more detail later. But these are very crucial details for designing your study and how you will proceed from here. Last but not least, this is also the time to think about cultural and ethical dimensions of your study and make sure that your proposed procedures are fair, humane, and make sense in the cultural context of who and what you're trying to study. We'll talk more specifically in later modules about how to do this. Once you've figured out how you're going to do the study, it's time to actually do it. Now begins the data collection phase. Now this is truly the fun part. Often there are bumps along the way and you have to problem solve and crisis manage in real life, but theoretically all you have to do is follow the procedures that you already wrote down and got approval for and enjoy the ride. Once you have all of your data, you've got to analyze it. And this essentially means making sense of the data you collected. Are the data reliable and valid? Are there any patterns or trends? Surprises? What conclusions can you draw? Not only do you note patterns that emerge, you would also apply what you see in the numbers to the original research question. Was your question answered? Were your hypotheses supported? Partially supported? In what ways? And how confident are you about those findings? We will introduce some basic data analysis approaches later in the semester. And last but certainly not least, we would report our findings to other scientists, consumers, and policymakers. Research is useless if the findings are not shared. The whole system of scientific progress is built upon scientists sharing their findings with each other and the public, which allows many researchers from all over who are not able to talk to each other every day or telepathically communicate with each other to build on each other's previous work, or in Newton's words, to stand on the shoulders of giants. Now, your research report will summarize what you asked, what you hypothesized, what you did, what you found, and what interpretations and conclusions you drew from the whole endeavor. It will also ask further questions that were inspired by your findings, and what gaps and limitations are there for your study, and what further work needs to be done in this area by other scientists to fill those gaps. We will also introduce how to do all of this closer to the end of the course. To summarize and quickly review, there are 5 major steps in any research endeavor: identifying study question, designing a study that would answer that question, collecting the data according to your study design, analyzing the data that you collected, and reporting your findings. Up next in this module, we'll take a more in-depth look at the first step, identifying a study question.